Good evening and welcome to TownHall Central for Thursday, May 14th, coming from Riverside County, California. And tonight we are celebrating America's 250th, and we have a special guest tonight. And I'm very excited about it because I've actually been there and seen it. It's a great exhibit. So let's get started. Be sure you put on your calendar, our next show will be on Thursday, June 11th, and we have our dear friend Jennifer Horn from AM 590 and AM 870. She's going to go over the results of our June 2nd primary. Make sure you get your ballots in early. Make sure you vote. And if you're going to mail it, do it before May 23rd because the post office will not mark it once you put it in the mailbox. You have to walk it to the window and have them stamp it. So very important. TownHall Central is brought to you by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and Greg Britton, attorney at law. So let's get started. Tonight, we have a special treat. We are blessed here in California to have two presidential libraries. And in honor of our nation's 250th anniversary, we have invited Vic Dennis, who is the docent, the head docent for the 250th anniversary exhibit at the Richard Nixon Presidential Library. And he's going to share about this exhibit and the library. It is sponsored by the National Archives. My son and a dear friend and her two kids, we went on President's Day. We got to meet Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Grant. But it was a great exhibit and the kids loved it. And we were there for 5 hours. That's really good for a 6-year-old. So I was very impressed. So let's get going. Let me tell you a little bit about Dennis. He's been a docent for 12 years, I believe, right? No, since 2014. He was also a lieutenant with the Los Angeles Police Department. So that's awesome. And so he's also past president of the docents at the library. And the docents are so helpful. They're there to answer any questions you have. And I highly recommend, I mean, it's great to have it in our own backyard. I've actually did a wedding there years ago. And I've gone to a couple other exhibits, and it's just a great place. So, Dennis, Vic, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on. And tell us a little bit more.
I've always been a political geek and always enjoyed presidential history. And even while I was working with the police department, I would frequently go to speaker events at the Nixon Library. I'd go to see congressmen and senators and various people from the world of politics. And so as I was getting near my retirement, I retired in May of 2013 after 30 years, and I felt like that was enough. It was time to move on. And I actually went to see Ann Coulter at the East Room of the Nixon Library in November of 2013. And while I was there was a recruitment table for the Docent Guild, and we still do that. We recruit from a lot of our events, our speaker events, and I'll talk about some of those speaker events in just a bit. Anyway, I signed an interest list, got a phone call about a week later, and in January of 2014, I was in training as a docent, and I'm now 3,750 hours and 12 and a half years into my time at the Nixon Library, and obviously I enjoy it very much. And I'm there quite a bit. So yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That sounds good. That's great. Well, would you want to go ahead and get started with your PowerPoint? You got a great slideshow to show everybody.
And if are you able to bring it up for me?
You have to start it. You have to start it.
Just hit the share button.
Hit the share button.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll just bring up okay.
There we go. Great.
You see it? Perfect. Yep. And I'm in show mode. Perfect. So what I'll do is I would suspect that just about everybody on and everybody with your organization has been to the library. Maybe some haven't been since 2016. That was kind of a big turning point for us, and I'll get to that. But I'll go through the library, and maybe I can share some things that people may not readily know. And then obviously I'll talk about the America 250 display, kind of do a virtual tour. And then I'll also talk about some of the events and some of the new things that we have going on at the library. And there's always stuff happening at the library. It's a busy place. So when people walk in, of course, you may not be aware that portrait of Richard Nixon was done by Norman Rockwell. and it was done for a cover of Look magazine. And every day, many of our visitors use that as a backdrop for pictures and selfies and various things. So that's the first thing that people are greeted to when they come in to the lobby. And the library, if you haven't been to the library, it's really a beautiful museum, beautiful gardens, and lots to see. Okay, let's see. We need to advance. Okay, there we go. This is an aerial view. The library, as most of you probably know, is located at the corner of Yorba Linda Boulevard and Eureka. And we've got this beautiful fountain right here in front. And unlike the Reagan Library, we have space limitations. We have no more room. Although, while we're looking at the aerial view, I will share with you that there is an open space over here on the Eureka side, and we are embarking, the foundation, Richard Nixon Foundation, is embarking on a project to build a civics education building in this spot right here. And the timetable for that is probably about 3 to 5 years or so. We will have a civics hall for civics programming aimed at educating young people in particular about civics and maybe filling some of the gaps that exist from education. And then over by the helicopter on the other side, we will build an enclosure for our helicopter, and people will be able to go inside. There'll be tables, some sort of a food facility, which we very much need. And people will be able to see the helicopter, rain or shine, 7 days a week. And so a lot to look forward to in the coming years here at the Nixon Library. And of course, this is where it all begins. One of the very first things we tell our guests about the house, or let me frame it another way, about the first question that we get from our guests when they're near the birthplace is, where did it come from? And the answer is, it was built right there in Yorba Linda. It was never moved, with the exception of raising the house to repair the broken foundation prior to the opening of the library in July 1990. But the house was always there. It was built in 1912 by Richard Nixon's father, Frank Nixon. In fact, the opening line in Richard Nixon's memoirs reads, "I was born in the house my father built." His father was Frank, and this is the house he built. And over the years, for decades, it was owned and operated by the Yorba Linda School District. It was used as a rental property for caretakers of the Yorba Linda School District. And needless to say, over the years, the house took a beating. And so when the library was getting ready to open, it needed a lot of painting, planting, installation of air conditioning, things like that. But structurally, the house is original. And what's even more amazing is that the bulk of the furniture inside the house is the same furniture that was there when Richard Nixon lived there as a young boy until the age of 9. So after 10 years, and when Richard Nixon was 9, the family moved to Whittier. And so Richard Nixon is truly a Southern California, native Californian president, spent 9 years in Yorba Linda, and all the rest, including adulthood, when he practices law and when he runs for the House of Representatives in 1946 and defeats a 5-term Democrat incumbent. His district was then the 12th district centered in Whittier. So truly, it's truly a Southern California story, and he still is the only native-born California president. Interestingly, 2 presidents that people ask us about relative to California are Ronald Reagan and Herbert Hoover. Reagan, because he was governor of California, but of course he was born in Illinois, and Herbert Hoover because he went to Stanford, but he's from Branch, Iowa, so West Branch, Iowa. So, and yes, we just say it was moved once. That's how they raised the house to repair the foundation. That's a pretty amazing.
Vic, did they now with the house? Can you? we didn't get a chance to go into the house. Can people go in the house to look inside, or is it
Oh, of course.
closed off? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously that was back when it was raised,
Right.
but it's not that way now. Yes, that is a major part of the library experience, is that a docent, someone like myself, takes people through the house and shares the various rooms, the living room and the you see the original piano that Richard Nixon learned to play the piano on at the age of 7. We take you in the kitchen, and kids are marvel at the idea of an ice box and a man delivering blocks of ice, to keep food cold. So yes, very much so. That is a highlight. That the helicopter, the Oval Office, we'll get to some of that. But those are some of the things that people especially want to see when they go to the library. And this is kind of neat. This is kind of a before and after, and there was a lot of cleanup work to do. But again, more importantly, I think structurally, the house has remained the same and the location has remained the same. And this is opening day, July 19th, 1990, and you can see the presidents that attended. And Richard Nixon lived 4 years beyond the opening. Mrs. Nixon died in 1993, 3 years after the opening. And of course, when Richard Nixon passed away in April of 1994, we had 5 presidents of the United States there, which was remarkable. Bill Clinton was the sitting president, and he was a speaker at Richard Nixon's funeral. And there they are on the walkway, ready to go inside the birthplace. Pretty remarkable. So the Richard Nixon Library is one of 13 active presidential libraries. Now the number is 14, because as you probably have heard, the Obama Library is just about to open. I'm not sure it is opened yet. Somebody may be able to correct me on that. It's in the process of getting ready to be opened. But we were unique because when the Richard Nixon Library opened in 1990, it was entirely privately funded, and the National Archives had no involvement with our library. That was due primarily to the circumstances of Richard Nixon's departure from office, his resignation. It wasn't until 2007 that the National Archives joined forces with the Richard Nixon Foundation, and now we are structured like all of the other presidential libraries. And then, of course, more to come. Most of us are aware that President Trump's library will be in Miami, though it won't open, obviously, for many, many years. But and in October 2016, we had a grand reopening, and we created the gallery that I'm going to take you through now, and that many of you have seen. So we were closed for 10 months. It was a very difficult time for us because there was really a limited amount of things that people could see. And of course, you get visitors from all over the country and beyond the United States. And many did not know that we were undergoing that renovation. And but it's like a kitchen remodel that you do in your house. It's terrible living through it, but when it's done, you like the fact that you have a brand new kitchen, or at least hopefully you do. So, and again, welcome. There's another shot. The admissions desk is right there on the right. That's where you start your visit. And we built a theater. The theater is named for Fred Malek, who worked for President Nixon at one time. And the theater was built specifically to show a 13-minute orientation film simply entitled Nixon. We are very proud of the film. It's the way we encourage our guests to start their visit. And I'm going to give you a little teaser of the opening.
This is the 37th time I have spoken to you from this office. Throughout the long and difficult period of Watergate, I have felt it was my duty to persevere. I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first.
You know, I was in the room when the Docent Guild first previewed that film, and interesting reaction because it opens with the resignation and Watergate, and some people wondered why we open with the worst, the worst news, the worst part. But in retrospect, it was really a brilliant thing to do, because then the remainder of the film really talks about the things that people don't know necessarily about Richard Nixon. So the film packs a lot of information into 13 minutes, and it's really it's a foundational way to begin your visit through the library. So the first part of our gallery begins with the craziness of the 1960s. And when you go through this section of the gallery, it's very loud, it's very in your face, there's video noise in the background. You're looking at the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK assassination, Martin Luther King, social upheaval, and of course, Vietnam sort of permeating or sort of a cloud over the entire 1960s. And this leads to the end of the hallway here, where President Richard Nixon wins the 1968 election against Senator Hubert Humphrey in a very close election. And we ask our guests the question, who would even want to run for president or become president in the midst of all of this chaos in the 1960s? And as Richard Nixon enters office in January of 1969, the animosity toward the Vietnam War is really reaching a zenith. So that's kind of the way we lead people into the library until we get to the full-scale replica of Richard Nixon's Oval Office. We are the only presidential library that has a one-to-one full-scale replica. Everything in this room was replicated to look the way it would have looked when Richard Nixon was president. And every Oval Office is different. It's located in the West Wing. And as Oval Offices go, Richard Nixon's was pretty sparse, especially if you compare it to the current Oval Office. But people really enjoy seeing it. They've got full reign of the room. They can walk around, they can sit on the sofa, and probably most importantly, they can sit behind the desk in the chair, have their picture taken, and I'll usually utter something to them like, we just ask that you don't sign any bills while you're here, and they'll give me a little courtesy laugh. And but anyway, people enjoy being in the Oval Office, and people are surprised. People comment on the size of the room. They television really distorts the look of the room, and different presidents use the Oval Office in different ways. As you know, President Trump is frequently behind the desk and does things with the media facing the desk. But anyway, we're very fortunate. This is something we did not have prior to 2016. That was because of Richard Nixon. He said if we could only have one room on display, he wanted the Lincoln Sitting Room to be on display, and we did for many, many years. Now, of course, we have the luxury of having both. And of course, on the bottom, the famous December 1970 visit by Elvis Presley. They had a 30-minute meeting, exchanged gifts, and Elvis was very patriotic, wanted to be a foot soldier in the war on drugs. And anyway, so we tell that story to people, and Elvis presents Richard Nixon with a Colt pistol, because don't most people who go to the White House to meet the president bring a pistol and ammunition? So leave that to Elvis. And then, of course, the trip to China. And what I'll say about that is, isn't it amazing how history tends to repeat itself? We have a Middle East section where we talk about 1973, Israel coming under attack. And of course, we all know about October 7th. And now, as President Trump is getting ready to depart from China, it sort of harkens back to Richard Nixon's trip in 1972, February of 1972. So it's a way that we can sort of bring the past with the present. And of course, we learn from history, hopefully, but history definitely has a way of repeating itself. And we talked about that. And then we get into Watergate, and it's interesting. People appreciate the fact that we have a room dedicated to Watergate. In fact, it's the largest room, single room dedicated to one topic. And so we take people through the road to the resignation. We talk about the White House taping system over here. We even have, kind of interesting, a shot here of the burglars who broke in, including James McCord, the former CIA officer. And we even have a copy of the security guard's log in which he describes seeing tape on the doors blocking the locks, which is what prompted the security guard to call the police. A plainclothes vice unit pulls up, arrests the burglars, and the rest is history. That leads ultimately to an FBI investigation, a Senate hearing, Woodward and Bernstein, the Washington Post, and later the discovery of a taping system in the White House, and ultimately in August of 1974, Richard Nixon resigns from office, as you saw in the opening of the film. Then we move on to the Kennedy-Nixon debate. Not only was this the first televised debate, but it's actually the very first general election presidential debate between two candidates during the general election. This was the first of 4 debates, and as many of you probably know, Richard Nixon didn't come off well on television, especially in the first debate, due partly to the fact that he had been hospitalized just prior to that and made some mistakes, wore the wrong color suit, didn't wear the pancake makeup, didn't do some things he should have done. But Richard Nixon got stronger as each debate went. But of course, the first one was the one that people most tuned into and most often remember. But again, the power of television. They had no idea back then how powerful and how consequential television would be to becoming elected president of the United States. Let me talk a little bit about some of the physical features at the library. We have a replica, upper left here, a replica of Richard Nixon's cabinet room. And we use that a lot with young people, students that come in, and we talk about how the president where the president sits, which is right about here in the middle, and has his cabinet members, his various cabinet secretaries. And of course, there are 3 portraits on the wall. Not surprisingly, right there is President Eisenhower, but in addition, there are 2 portraits, one of Teddy Roosevelt, and the third might surprise some people, and that's of Woodrow Wilson, about whom Richard Nixon was a fan. We have our older theater, our original theater, which we call, not surprisingly, Theater 37. And of course, we have the East Room, and I bet many of you have attended, I understand some of you have attended weddings at the Nixon Library. Some of you may have even attended a prom at the Nixon Library, and certainly our many speaking events. There's almost not a day when something isn't going on in the East Room. It is used all the time, and it's a beautiful space. It was made possible by a donation of Catherine Locher, who is an heiress to the Star-Kissed Tuna company, and her name is on buildings in many, many places, and she was a good friend of the Nixons. We also have a research room. Some of you may not be aware of this, but downstairs in the administrative area, we have this research room that is often used by scholars, authors. When somebody like Brett Baer, for example, was working on his book on Eisenhower, he did some research about Nixon because, of course, they're very much linked. And so we get authors, teachers, just people interested in history about Richard Nixon or President Eisenhower. We claim to be one of probably in the top 3 most used research rooms of the Presidential Library series. That is available Monday through Friday by appointment only. And that can be accomplished at the front desk of our library. And of course, we are very proud of our gardens. The Knutson family, Tom and Valley Knutson, donated money to help make our California formal garden possible. and then the birthplace, and of course our roses. In April, May, and June, which of course is right at the heart of wedding season, our roses just go absolutely crazy. And we are one of the largest rose gardens in Orange County, California. And of course, as I mentioned, we do weddings. You may not have known that we average about 120 weddings each year. Sometimes on Saturdays, we'll have 2 weddings, one in the morning, one in the evening. But there are very few Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays in which we do not have a wedding. They take place in the Pat Nixon Amphitheater, this open grassy area, and then the receptions typically happen right next door in the aforementioned East Room. And of course, you can see the birthplace ever present. So the brides can choose to face the reflecting pool, or they can face the birthplace. And of course, we do what the bride wants. Now, here's a new wrinkle, so to speak, is sunrise yoga. So one of the things I wanted to mention are some of the events that we have coming and some of the new things. We're always looking for new things and activities. We now do sunrise yoga in the Pat Nixon Garden, the amphitheater. It looks like the first session is June the 13th. Looks like they happen every other week or twice each month. I'm not sure what days of the week those are. Somebody could probably tell me. But anyway, something to be aware of. And we now do summer concerts. We have cover bands that do country, classic rock, all kinds of different things. And those are going to be on Wednesday nights this summer. Last summer they were on Thursday nights, but they're moving to Wednesday nights. Kind of a nice family thing. And here's some music, and on a nice summer evening, it's really a nice thing to do. And talked about our speaker series. We have really some impressive speakers coming up in the very near future. Jack Carr, the Navy SEAL and author, has been to our library before. He's coming back May the 18th. And of course, we're in the midst of the gubernatorial race. And some of you may have seen or heard from Chad Bianco recently. And of course, he's been involved in some of the debates. I know there was one tonight. And then on May 25th, Memorial Day, we'll have a free concert in the East Room. I believe it's going to be at 11 o'clock a.m. And on May 26th, Brett Baer returns. And he typically does his TV show, his 3 o'clock PST show from the birthplace, from behind the birthplace. It gets a beautiful shot of him standing with the reflecting pool and the king palm trees in the background. So that's kind of, he has a new book, of course, The Case for America. Just a little bit historical perspective about Richard Nixon. Of course, the early years growing up in Yorba Linda and Whittier, all the way up to 1945 when he gets ready to run for his first political office in 1946. And then, of course, from 46, the thing that's amazing about his political career is the meteoric rise he undergoes from his first election to the House of Representatives in 46 to just a few years later in 1952, when Ike selects young Richard Nixon, who at the time was only 39 years old. He's the second youngest vice president in history. In fact, interestingly, J.D. Vance was just a couple of months older than Richard Nixon, making him the third youngest vice president in history. The wilderness years is that period that sandwiched between the loss to JFK in 1960 and the victory in 1968 against Hubert Humphrey. And he wrote a book. He ran unsuccessfully, of course, for governor of California. That's when they proclaimed Richard Nixon was politically dead. And of course, 6 years later, he became the 37th president of the United States. And then, of course, his presidency from 69 to 74, which includes obviously the trip to China and several other things, creating the EPA and many other things that people don't necessarily know about. And then post-presidency, he was really an advisor to several presidents, including Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, met with Bill Clinton several times in which they talked about foreign policy, got along very, very well. Some uniquenesses, and there are many about Richard Nixon. Again, the only native-born California president. I'll just hit a couple. One of the ones I really like is, isn't it amazing that in the history of presidents, there are only 4 men who have held the office of congressman, senator, vice president, and president. Only 4. I just find that truly amazing. And you can see Lyndon Johnson, Andrew Johnson, and John Tyler and Richard Nixon are the only 4 to hold all 4 offices. He was the first president to visit China and Moscow, created OSHA, created the EPA. All moon landings occurred in the Nixon administration. And as vice president, he was instrumental in the creation of NASA in 1958 as a civilian oversight body of the space program, ended the Vietnam draft, went to an all-volunteer army, signed Title IX, which of course is in the news a lot. And of course, he's the first and only president to resign from office. So a lot of truly uniquenesses. Now, the America 250 exhibit. Different libraries are featuring their own America 250 exhibits. Ours is running now through early 2027. So you do have time to see it. It's going to be around for a while. This is kind of when you first walk in, you're greeted with this picture. We often use this for some of the tour groups that come in, and we take a group picture with them as they come in. What the exhibit attempts to do is hit about 4 or 5 what we call pivot points or significant points in the development of our history that help make the country what it is today. So we start with the Boston Tea Party and the colonists not being happy with being ruled by England and being taxed, and it was the Stamp Act and the tax on tea that really sent them over the edge. And we have a little interactive display here. Pull that. 342 cases of tea were dumped in, and you can see the colonists making a lot of commotion. And that was a precursor to, of course, the Revolutionary War. We talk a lot about George Washington, and we've got pictures of Valley Forge and how instrumental some of these key battles were. And of course, with young people, we talk about tenacity and perseverance, and how this young upstart, army went against the established England and troops, and eventually prevailed, and how significant George Washington was to our history as both a general and, of course, the first president of the United States. We talk about that with young people. And then, of course, we get into slavery, and we talk about the abolitionists and the impact of Abraham Lincoln, his election. Now, I'm going to show you a few items that are in cases. These are items that are loaned to us for the duration of this exhibit. And this is one of my favorites, and one that I point out to our tour groups. You obviously have the framed picture of Abraham Lincoln on the left, but on the right, this is an actual signed letter written by Abraham Lincoln to Ulysses S. Grant, 1865, in which he basically tells Ulysses S. Grant, just continue to persevere, do not let anything hinder you in your efforts. And I just think it's remarkable. So I share that with young people. And of course, that's a recurring theme that we share with young people, is bouncing back from adversity and not giving up, and some of those traits. Louisiana Purchase, pretty good investment for $15 million, Thomas Jefferson. And look how much of the United States was added. About a third of the country was added as a result of the Louisiana Purchase. Early surgical kit, getting back to the Civil War. Pretty amazing. How would you like to be operated on with some of that equipment? That would be a field surgical kit. Then we get into Thomas Edison. I love talking about him. Got his first patent when he was 18 years old, ended up with over 1,000 patents, and was part of significant change and growth in our country. We've got a interactive here where people can pull down these switches and operate lights and early movie and phonograph, and just to look at some of the many things that Thomas Edison created that have changed our life. Another man who changed the way we build things and created the concept of the assembly line and made it possible for people who worked on the assembly line to be able to afford the automobiles that they were making, Henry Ford in Detroit. So we talk a little bit about him and how, and of course the modern freeway system really came into being in the 50s during President Eisenhower, and how cars and automobiles have changed our life. This is pretty neat. The women obviously played a major role in World War II, taking the place of men in factories and building airplanes. This was a welder's helmet that belonged to this woman here. And so we use that as a way to kind of talk about the role that women played during the war to do what they could to keep things going. And of course, we begin the modern kitchen, as opposed to the birthplace where we have the ice box and the old kerosene stove. Now we're beginning to have a modern stove and a blender and things like that, and a refrigerator. And of course, Richard Nixon. In the window here, you see scenes from Richard Nixon's great kitchen debate in 1959 when he was vice president in Moscow in a American kitchen at the World's Fair, getting into a finger pointing with Khrushchev over capitalism versus communism, a conversation that really began with a disagreement about washing machines. And this is another example of things that we have on loan to us. This is really neat, especially if you're a music or sports fan. This is a trumpet, a B-flat Selmer trumpet that belonged to Louis Armstrong, along with a mouthpiece that has Satchmo engraved in it. We've got Bob Dylan's harmonica signed by him. We've got a baseball signed by Mickey Mantle, and an all-star baseball signed by Jackie Robinson. So some neat stuff there. And people get a kick out of that. Again, those items are loaned to us through the duration. Then we get into the space program and how important the space program is. Again, every astronaut that ever set foot on the moon did so during the Nixon administration. This is a training helmet from the Mercury program, which of course was the precursor to the Apollo program. Okay. And then just a little bit about the Docent Guild. We are a unique Docent Guild. We're about 210, 215 strong, all volunteers. We are the only independent 501c3 of all the presidential libraries. That again is because of the circumstances of Richard Nixon's departure when the library was all private. So too was the Docent Guild. And we have grown to over 200. We have our own 9-member board of directors. We have our own treasury, manual, bylaws, and we support our shifts, our regular day shifts in which we interact with guests at the birthplace, the Oval Office, all over the library. We support book signings. We support corporate events. We do tours, many tours, and Speakers Bureau, of which I'm representing at this moment. We meet the most interesting people. You've got Julie Eisenhower, David Eisenhower. By the way, you might not be aware that Camp David was named for David Eisenhower. Previous to that, it was called Shangri-La. And this was neat. This was the Coxes, Tricia and Edward, celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary at the Nixon Library, and the Docent Guild got a chance to take a picture with them and kind of have a little tea and a little get together with them, and that was very nice. Of course, they have the famous rose garden wedding. And the reason that the gazebo under which they were married is in our gardens is because the couple came to Yorba Linda for their 25th wedding anniversary. And then, of course, this picture was taken at their 50th. It was really, really a nice event. And of course, Abe Lincoln, who travels all the way from Covina, California, to be with us on President's Day. He's very good. And of course, I had the opportunity, I'm back there somewhere. I think that's me right there. And, but more importantly is Eric Trump. And that was a very well attended event. And of course, Associate Justice Gorsuch just recently. And we're always looking for new docents. And I'm sure many of you are just looking for more things to occupy your time. What's required is an 8 to 12 week training period, 2 or 3 4-hour shifts a month. You can pick your shifts anywhere you want. We're open 7 days a week. We only close 3 days out of the entire year. So very flexible scheduling, a desire to serve, effective communication skills, and interest in history is probably helpful. Many of us were either teachers, we have lawyers, we have a lot of law enforcement, we have aerospace people, all kinds of backgrounds represented in our Docent Guild. And if you want to know more about upcoming events, you'd want to use the nixonfoundation.org. And then we are on Facebook and Instagram at nixondocents.org. And of course, there's my contact information. And that is the new Nixon Library. And what are your questions?
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you, Vic. This is great information. And I'm disappointed when I was there on President's Day because it was raining so bad that day.
Oh,
we didn't go outside. So we didn't see the helicopter. We just looked out the window and at the house, because I would love to do that.
It's a shame because the gardens are beautiful. The birthplace, of course, is a major, major draw. And of course, the burial site too.
Yes.
One of the things that I didn't even mention is the fact that the Nixons, like at the Reagan Library, the Nixons are buried at the library and just steps away from the birthplace. So it's not lost on a lot of our guests, the fact that Richard Nixon was born and buried steps apart. And yes, I just love the symmetry of that. And of course, the library covers everything else in between.
Yes.
But it's beautiful. And I remember that it was raining, and that was disappointing. And yeah, if next time you go, try to go on a day when it's not raining.
Yes.
And,
yes.
It doesn't rain that often, but when it does, it does.
Well, we still had a great time, but yes, it would be great if you guys had food there.
I know. Believe me, I hear that all the time, and we're working on it. Yeah.
When I did the wedding in '94, the front entrance wasn't there. It was the original front entrance. And that's, so my friends got married on the lawn facing the reflecting pool near the gazebo. And the reception was in the reception area, the old reception area, as you walked into the entrance. That's how it was. And I liked at the time, the guests, while the wedding party was taking wedding pictures, the guests got to go through the library. So here the guests are getting entertained, they're getting history while the wedding party is taking their pictures. I thought that was a great idea. But I remember standing there, I'm actually a wedding coordinator, so standing there watching the wedding, and I turned, I'm like, oh, that's where they're buried. Okay. I was like, I didn't know they were right there. So
it's really a great place to do weddings for a number of reasons. First of all, the parking is really easy. Second of all, the ceremony and the reception occur steps apart. Mm-hmm. And from a photography perspective, you've got the run of the place. Pictures can be taken of the involved parties at the Oval Office, at the Rose Garden, in front of the birthplace, by the helicopter. Just a tremendous photography opportunity. So it's really a wonderful place to get married. But
it is, and since you guys built the east
East Room,
Room. Yeah, that has really,
2004.
yeah,
Yeah,
that has really upped your game for getting larger events.
huge.
Yeah, and
Interestingly, for a roundtable event, we can hold about 350, and for theater seating, like for a Justice Gorsuch event, we can go up to about 700.
wow, wow, that's
Yeah.
great. Now, when we went on President's Day, the rate was lower, the entrance fee. Will that be the same for Memorial Day and maybe 4th of July?
The price does not change generally, except for two major exceptions. The birthdays of Richard Nixon, January 9th, and the birthday of Mrs. Nixon on March 16th, the admission is free.
Oh, okay. Okay.
There's no charge, and we typically have music and speakers and various wreath ceremonies and things like that. On President's Day, sometimes the admission is half price, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
It depends. That's all under the control of the Nixon Foundation.
Got
And
it.
usually that'll be on the website, on the nixonfoundation.org website ahead of time.
Yeah, and it was half price when we went that day. An interesting fact, in the city of La Habra, Richard Nixon's office is actually still the little plaque there. It's in the parking lot of the La Habra Community Center. So,
Yeah.
my dad used to live in La Habra, and I remember seeing the sign, and I went and looked out. I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's sad that they tore it down, but they still have a plaque there. So that is on Euclid and La Habra Boulevard, if you guys are out in the La Habra area. So
And
let's go ahead.
And in Whittier, I was going to say, in Whittier, we still have the building where Richard Nixon had his first law office, and there's a plaque there. That's right off of Greenleaf in Philadelphia. He had a law office room 601 on the 6th floor, and it's called the Nixon Building now. And that's where he had his first, and there's other places. Many people in the city of Whittier, I live in Whittier, many people in Whittier will tell you that Richard Nixon was in their living room, and they're telling you the truth because he campaigned for the House, and he campaigned for the Senate, and did many visits to residents and had teas and gave his pitch and all that sort of thing. So yeah, a lot of
That's
history
awesome.
in La Habra and Whittier and so forth. Yeah.
And Whittier College too. He went to Whittier College. Yes.
Yeah. In fact, Whittier College has a room with some of Richard Nixon's vice president artifacts, vice presidential artifacts mainly. But yeah, a lot of history. Richard Nixon went there and enjoyed his time. In fact, is quoted as saying that his football coach, Chief Newman, was the second most influential man in his life after his father. Yeah.
That's great. And then Pat Nixon, if I remember correctly, there is a community center in LA County somewhere.
It's in Cerritos.
Cerritos, yes. So did she live in Cerritos? I know she lived, wasn't she born in Nevada?
Ely, Nevada, yes. But at a young age, she came to Artesia and then later became Cerritos. But yes, she spent the bulk of her growing up time in the Artesia, Cerritos area. And there is a tribute to her at the Senior Center in Cerritos. Yes, absolutely. And she went to the University of Southern California. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's why I saw the picture of the USC band when they opened the library. Okay. That makes sense. Okay.
That's why they were there. Uh-huh.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's open it up. This is the great thing about our show where we have the speakers answer questions. So do any of you have questions for Vic? If you want to raise your hand, we'll call on you. Anybody have questions? Now's your chance. Oh, I did see somebody say, do anybody, if you're a veteran, is there a discount if you're a veteran?
There is. I can't quote you exactly what it is, but there is a savings for veterans and young people and yes.
And their website is very easy to navigate. I will say that. So, any questions?
And on certain military holidays, veterans are free.
Great.
Again, I would look on a case-by-case basis, but I would venture to say Memorial Day, Veterans Day, some of those holidays. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Now, are you doing anything special for the actual Independence Day that you know of?
There'll be a concert. Yeah.
Okay.
There'll be a concert, likely a free concert in the East Room. Depending on what day, I think July 4th is a Saturday this year. So most likely it will occur on July the 4th. Sometimes if July 4th occurs on another day of the week, they'll you know what I mean? They'll do the concert on the weekend, but in this case, July 4th is a Saturday. So
Okay.
yeah, that's something to look forward to. Now, that doesn't give you admission to the library per se, the exhibits, but it does get you into the concert for free.
Okay. And that would be in the East Room, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. Mhm.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? Cynthia, any questions for Vic?
There's one in here that says, is there a veterans discount for the museum?
Oh, I just asked that.
I have like four things happening at one time. And then I didn't see any other questions. I put up the locations for the library online, the events link, and the National Archives Freedom 250 link.
Great.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, the library is well done. The other time I went to the library, it was when they had a display of all the first ladies' gowns.
Yes.
Oh, that was
really popular. They had an amazing number of gowns from first ladies through the years. I think they had something like 20 gowns or more, but that was a really popular, that's going back a ways now.
Yes. Well, that was before the East Room, way before the East Room, but that was awesome. Now somebody raised, Roy, you have a question. You raised your hand. You want to go ahead and ask your question to Vic?
Yeah, my wife actually has a question, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
We're members of the library. Don't we get in for free?
No.
Yep. You can get in not only to the Nixon Library, but any of the other 12
Residential libraries.
Oh, awesome.
or soon to be 13 with that as well. Yes.
Oh, that's great to know.
Yeah.
So how do people join that to get that program?
If you become a member, when you're at the library, there are brochures as far as how to become a member of the Nixon Library. And if you join and become a member of the Nixon Library, then you get a card, and that card entitles you to admission to the other presidential libraries.
Fantastic. That's great. And I love the fact that you're building a building for civics.
Yep.
Because
civics
we don't teach
education on
that
the
is
Eureka
great.
side, and then finally an enclosure to the actually the helicopter is going to be sent off here pretty soon to be painted and refurbished a little bit, and then it'll be brought back when the enclosure is done. So it'll be inside a building and with a food facility. There'll be tables. If you picture the Air Force One pavilion at the Reagan Library, this will be at least from the early drawings, the renderings, it looks like this will be kind of a mini version of that.
Okay.
On a much smaller scale, but nevertheless, it's going to be really neat, the opportunity to get a little something to eat and kind of sit look up at the helicopter and obviously be able to tour it, rain or shine, hot or cold, and which will be really a nice feature.
That's nice. Roy, did you put your hand up again?
Yeah, my question is, do you do any outreach to public as well as private schools on the history of, well, not just Nixon, but certainly the role of the president in this country through the years, through the centuries, actually?
Yeah, the answer is yes. The National Archives does a lot of education. They do online. They send speakers to schools. But probably the thing that we do on a regular basis is have school groups come and tour. We have charter schools, we have homeschool groups, we have public schools from K through 12. During the week, during the school year, we have hundreds of thousands of school kids tour the library almost on a daily basis, on a weekday basis. About 9:45, the yellow school bus pulls up and the kids pile out, and we divide them into groups, and docents, the people like me, I've probably done hundreds of tours in my 12 and a half years or so. And we enjoy doing tours. It's a favorite thing that I do at the library is to lead tours, be they adults, be they kids, but that's a way that we not only talk about Richard Nixon in the 60s and 70s, but we talk about the branches of government. We talk about how our government is set up, our charters, Bill of Rights. We talk about all of that.
Yeah.
And we enjoy doing that. And of course, it's, as I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's so badly needed.
Yes, it's
All right,
very badly needed.
Yeah.
Will they ever bring back the box so that we can bring our tattered and faded flags to be disposed of rightfully?
I'll ask that question and get back to Cynthia or Denise. I'd be happy to ask about that. I don't know the answer.
'Cause I think that, in years past, I think it was the Boy Scouts
Mhm.
who were
That's correct.
offering that, where you could take your tattered and faded American flag so they could dispose of it rightfully.
That's
I'll
correct.
find out and I'll
Yeah.
get back, Denise or Cynthia, I'll connect with you on that and you can, yeah, good
Yeah.
question.
No, it's a good question. And yes, usually the Boy Scouts do. I know the Navy League in Norco also does that. Sometimes the American Foreign Legion chapters sometimes do it. But yeah, so as soon as Vic finds out, I can let you guys know. No problem. That's a good question.
Very good question.
Anybody else? It's really amazing opportunity to go see it. Go ahead.
Armed Forces Day is Saturday, the 16th.
Mhm.
Is there anything special happening this Saturday?
No, typically not. We don't cover every single holiday. And that's one that we also don't do anything on Labor Day, typically. Now, that's not to say that there may be things in the future, but as of now, no. Good question, though.
As a side note, my wife's, she's an Army brat along with her twin sister. Her father was an attorney on George Patton's Third Army staff.
Wow.
And she and her sister and mother lived in Germany and Austria for nearly 10 years from the very end of the war right on to the time they graduated from high school in Heidelberg. So I bring this up as a point because the history of Patton is so rich and so much in need of explanation to many of our younger kids who know nothing about Patton or anything much beyond I would say the Vietnam War. That's something that really I'm sure will be emphasized in your programs. As I'm sure that Richard Nixon was certainly involved in one form or another when World War II was occurring during
Yeah.
that time.
He served overseas in the South Pacific, yeah, from 43 to 45 as a lieutenant commander in the Naval Reserve, absolutely. But that would be an interesting topic for a future special exhibit, maybe on, generals or something like that. But Patton would be absolutely. You remind me of something that I tell people all the time. One of the best things about volunteering in the role that I do and my colleagues do is that we learn so much from our guests, and people are very willing to share with us things that from their family history that maybe connect them to Richard Nixon or some aspect of the 60s or 70s, and people just share amazing things with us, and we learn. Sometimes I feel like we learn just as much or more from our guests than they learn from us. So you remind me of that. And
I know my wife could spend 3/4 of an hour just talking about Patton.
Well, the fact that he did not want to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery,
Yeah.
he didn't want to be buried at West Point, and he's buried at the American Cemetery in Luxembourg City, Luxembourg.
yeah, it's funny. Probably the thing that I can talk most and longest about, I didn't even mention tonight, and that's the Checker speech.
Oh, yeah.
The 1952 Checkers was one of my absolute favorite things about Richard Nixon, and critical to his presidential history, because if it had not been for the success of that speech, we wouldn't even have a Richard Nixon presidential library.
Yeah.
And I can talk about that probably for hours and bore everyone in the room. But I didn't even mention it, and often on tours I don't mention it because there's just too many other things to talk about. But but that's just one example of something that I particularly find just fascinating. And there's just so many nuances. But anyway, there's lots of those kinds of things. And people have their own checker speeches, in their interest level that they bring to us. And it really makes it, adds to the whole experience for us as docents. So
My great uncle was a supporter of Nixon, and in his cabin in Lincoln City, Oregon, his wall was filled with Nixon memorabilia, and he did go to the inaugural ball. One of
wow.
them. So that was interesting. I remember going to see that as a kid. So
The first one, 1969.
he must have been, and he
Yeah.
did go to China not long after Nixon went, because basically
Wow.
Nixon opened up travel to China. So that was interesting too. So, but yeah, and one thing the kids loved when we went is hearing Nixon talking to the astronauts. That was, you can actually, they have phones at different areas within the museum where you can hear him speaking to the astronauts, and there's some other areas. And that's really interesting too, because the kids, I tried to show my son recently with the astronauts coming down from their mission around the moon. And he was like, yeah, but they loved hearing the president speaking to the astronauts from 69. So, and I remember coming out and watching it. So
We actually have the green phone that President Nixon used to make that long distance phone call from the Oval Office. We have that phone on display. It's in the big room with the astronauts up on the wall.
yes, yeah.
So with the moon rocks and all that. Yeah. So amazing. Yeah.
Well,
Heather, you've got a question. Good to see you.
Yes, hi. You mentioned that you have a variety of people who serve as docents, but what requirements do you have for someone to be a docent?
Well, going back to the slide, you have to be 18 years of age, and we're looking for people that have an interest in history, communicate well, and the commitment is really not, it's not a heavy lift. It's a 8 to 12 week training program. We provide all the study materials, and you're trained one-on-one with experienced trainers, and once you've completed your training, the requirement is 2 or 3 4-hour shifts per month. The difference is whether you're working or retired. If you're retired, the requirement is 3 4-hour shifts a month. You can pick the days, morning or afternoon, 7 days a week. And if you're a full-time student or if you're employed, it's 2 4-hour shifts a month. It's not a heavy lift, and you get to do all the things that we've talked about tonight. So if anybody is interested in knowing more about that, Denise or Cynthia, you can feel free to send people my way. You have my contact information.
Yes, we can do that.
And I would be happy to answer questions. The process begins with an informational open house that we do twice a year. And we invite people who are potentially interested to come sit in the cabinet room at the library and learn about what's involved. What's the commitment? What do you do? Where do you serve? How does the training work? And then from there, we do interviews. And then if you become part of the class, it starts with an orientation, and you do an 8 to 12 week training process, and you're off and running. And 12 years later, you're like me with your 3,700 hours and still counting.
So is there a pop quiz after each training session?
No, you just basically do it with people.
Okay.
You interact, begin slowly. The trainers kind of model it, and then let you kind of slowly dip your toes into the water, and increasingly you get more and more comfortable. And there's a lot of repetition built into the training process, and people get it, and it works out very well.
Great.
We get some great people coming into our guild. We have some amazing people that have done amazing things throughout their careers. So,
yeah, they were very helpful when we were there. Heather, do you still have a question?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. Anybody else? Well, I think, is there still a question? Am I seeing anybody? Okay. Well, I think we will end tonight. I want to thank Vic so much for your time and great information. I highly recommend you guys go see the Nixon Library. Again, it's in our back door. But if you're somewhere else in California, make it a trip. Yorba Linda is a pretty city, and it's a really nice library. And there's restaurants around the corner until they build their own. But there is a Chick-fil-A not too far. But we really appreciate you coming on and sharing the information about the library, and definitely go see the 250th exhibit. It's a great way. It's great for kids. So if you got kids or grandkids, definitely take them because it's a good history lesson. I homeschool my son, so it's a good history lesson for him. So let me go over again. Our next show will be on Thursday, June 11th. And we have the fabulous Jennifer Horn, who is from AM 870 and AM 590. And she's going to go over the June 2nd primary results. And the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and Great Britain are our sponsors. We appreciate them so much. And Vic, again, thank you so much. This has been great.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. And we will see you guys on June 11th, and have a wonderful night. And we'll see you in a few weeks. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Great presentation.